The argument for sending humans into space. Who wants to? You want to do that one?
Well, there's one particular human I'd like to send into space. How everybody in this auditorium knows who I'm talking about.
All right, so I have no volunteers. Who wants to make the argument against sending humans into space? I have no volunteers for that either.
I won't even drive to Santa Monica.
I mean, our robots are so efficient and so capable that it seems to me that the risk of human life, when we can send these robots and they are sending our senses, we're developing strategies for resolving the atmospheres and surfaces of the planets of other suns. So in a way, it seems kind of silly because the travel time for humans at this point, at this moment, although in Cosmos Possible Worlds, we'll glimpse a possible future which will be quite different. But for the moment, the risk of life doesn't make that much sense. On the other hand, there is something about the human engagement and involvement in the drama of the courage of a small group of humans venturing to a new horizon. And that's very compelling. And it might be a much better channel for our testosterone and for the other hormones that motivate us to do things that are destructive. So I can see the argument for sending humans, but I really feel that it's much more for some kind of sociobiological purpose than it is for actual exploration.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Consider that no one that I know of has ever given a ticker tape parade for a robot. There's something about the shared vicarious participation of an audience with one of our own species who experiences the great travels. This has gone on ever since we had the great voyages across the oceans. The hero would come back and tell the stories of those travels. That has value for our inspiration, for the next generation. And I'm disappointed with my colleagues who, in my generation, many of whom became astrophysicists because of the Apollo program, yet today are saying, oh, we don't need to send people, we'll just send the robot, denying a next generation of having the heroes that they had to get them interested in the field. So
I want to ask everybody about the morality of risking contaminating worlds that might already have life. Now, I got a guy I know from my covering visual effects, a guy named Tim Sassoon. He's got a great Facebook feed, mostly science. You should all follow it. He's always on this, about how offended he is at the idea of things like The Martian, where Matt Damon creates a farm using human night soil and plants potatoes on a planet that might have life.
Right.
So how great a risk is that, and how can we guard against that? What's our moral obligation to ecosystems that are alien to us?
We're there already.
But we don't have to keep doing it.
No, sorry. NASA has an entire office within itself that concerns that shapes missions to destinations based on the likelihood of it having life that we might then study later. And do you want to say?
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are 5 categories of worlds according to the NASA conventions and the International Space Agency conventions. The worlds that you can go to. For instance, it was possible to crash Cassini into Saturn because it was deemed a Category 1 world, in which whatever conceivable microbes, tardigrades that could have, still been on the spacecraft would have been destroyed before they could do any harm. And it was unlikely that there was any life form there that it could disturb. But then there are Category 5 worlds. The reason that Cassini had to be destroyed was because there was a Category 5 moon very too close, which if very tiny odds, Cassini had crashed into Enceladus.
Yeah, sure, Enceladus, yeah.
Then that would have been a violation of these conventions. So there has been some thought given to this, and
Yeah, so your friend he thinks it's a problem, but we've solved it and we're on to other problems right now. We've been there. But remember when the Apollo astronauts went into the containment vehicle?
Yeah.
Just in case.
They don't do that anymore.
No, we don't do it anyway because the moon. Well, because we're not going to the moon anymore. But that's why we don't do that anymore. But the moon, based on any knowledge we have of life, is completely sterile. And if there's a sterile environment, you don't worry about it. If there's one that might have had life and you could contaminate it because somebody sneezed on your vessel before you sent it there, and there are microbes that could, the alien could get the flu, you protect against that.
Wasn't there an episode of Cosmos that you wrote that dealt with the seeding of this planet by possible microbes that came from collisions of
yes,
of
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
That remains a very
so it could happen naturally.
Hypothesis. I can't resist adding that it was Carl who was responsible for the quarantine on the Apollo mission, and all the astronauts really hated him for that reason. Because when they came home, they had to sit in this kind of FEMA trailer for like 3 weeks or 2 weeks before they could be reunited with their families. But Carl was extremely conservative in this area. He really believed that our knowledge was so limited that we should err on the side of the most extreme caution. Yeah.
How do you feel about when you look at Tatooine? Do you think that's a possible world?
I think Encino. Impossible. Yeah, it's a desert planet. Sure, right? That's the sand people? No. I got that wrong?
Yeah, no, that's the same.
Okay, all right.
Panic in your eyes.
Don't get that wrong in this audience. Okay.
He's been toiling in real science.
All right, Jason. Jason, you're up. Dagobah from Star Wars.
I have no idea.
No idea.
I think there are so many planets out there that anything is truly possible. And obviously, it depends on when you visit them. A billion years from now, this planet will be different, and a billion years ago, it was different. So I think all of it has an opportunity to be possible. And so yes.
All right, Seth, I've got one for you. Pandora from Avatar.
From what?
Avatar.
Yeah, I mean, with enough of a budget, yeah, I think it's possible.
I'm going to throw one at Anne. I don't know how much of a Star Trek fan you are, but the Mirror Universe from Star Trek?
Wow. Well, actually, we have a mirror universe in the new season of Cosmos. And, I mean, I actually am not that familiar with the mirror universe.
Is there an evil Neil
I'm sorry?
in the mirror universe?
How do you know this isn't the evil Neil?
But
Right, Star Trek Discovery fans?
No, but it is true that we explore the notion of the multiverse, which is all universes that consist of every possible permutation. You do take the bus. You don't take the bus. That's a whole new universe. And so, I'm sure that knowing if it was from the original Star Trek, there was probably a nucleus of a great scientific idea at the heart of it.
Neil, I got one for you. From Men in Black, The Galaxy. Do you remember what I'm talking
Oh, yeah, the galaxy on the belt of Orion.
about? That's right.
Yeah. Orion the cat. So, here's a problem with that.
That's why we're here.
It was imagined 100 years ago or so as we started probing into the atom, and we discovered, oh my gosh, there's like there's a nucleus and particles orbiting it, like a solar system. And is it that way all the way down, and could it be that way all the way up? And what we discovered is that as you go to the small, the laws of physics manifest differently and affect matter differently than they do in the large. And this is the difference between relativity, general relativity, Einstein's theory of gravity, and quantum physics. They manifest differently on those two different scales. So it's not just a scaling relation all the way down. And inside the atom, we've been inside the atom. We've been inside the proton. We've been inside the neutron. There are quarks there. We've found fundamental particles. There's not like a solar system inside the quark. So, no, there is no galaxy on the belt of Orion. But if I can, I just have to say, because I'm usually quite critical of the Star Wars franchise, I want to say that in the Star Wars episode 4, the first of the series, it was Luke comes out and he sees a double sunset. That is the only scientifically accurate thing in all the Star Wars. It was more than half the stars you see in the night sky are double in multiple star systems, and no one had thought to put a planet around any of them. And so the fact that this was portrayed in Star Wars, I just give a shout out to that exercise in bringing the rest of the star family into the storytelling that unfolded. And by the way, you can't have a stable orbit, this is inside baseball here, you can't have a stable orbit if the stars are too far apart, because your orbital allegiance would get challenged depending on where you are. Those two stars were close enough together so that this planet's orbit would orbit them both and see gravitationally only one object, and thereby keep a stable orbit. So it even got that right. So,
students go home and they're in a household for 16 hours, that they're not in the classroom or not educated, and it's not important. Your shows are important and Cosmos are important and you get shown. What else can I do?
Give up now. Escape while you can. Let me just give a quick answer. Seth might have more to add to that. I've thought about this problem, and
You can start with a flaming turd on the front stoop and go from there.
The fact that there's a rise in the flat Earth movement, to me, is evidence of two things. One, we live in a country that protects free speech. Two, we have a failed educational system. Okay? It's evidence of those two things. Now, I think as an educator, what you need to think of is not only what body of information are you transferring to your students. Information is good, but it is only a fraction of what is ultimately most important to a person. What's most important to a person is training them how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. You don't know how to think. How data become information, and how information becomes knowledge. Now knowledge becomes wisdom. That arc is something that I don't think is taught in school, because you're handed a syllabus by a county board and they say, have them learn this and then have them regurgitate it back, then we deem them educated. Well, in fact, if they learned nothing but how to think, then when they graduate, they become lifelong learners and will learn much more than you could have ever taught them in the first place.
Tyson Nye 2020.
The answer is no. But it's not that I haven't thought about why my answer is no. I'll just tell you that if people are disgruntled with their leaders, consider that there are people out there, fellow citizens, who voted for them. So this exercise is not just about swapping one leader for another and all will be well. If you're disgruntled with the current leadership, remember that 60 million people of your fellow countrymen voted for this person. So, swapping people doesn't change the electorate, it only changes who got elected. And we want to live in a country that is, yes, pluralistic, but understands the difference between a fact and something that's false. That's where we got to start there. Then you won't have these issues, but let's swap out the president. It's because deep down, there are fundamental misconceptions about how this world works.